hear you.
Loud and clear.
And am I good too?
You're good. You're very clear.
Okay. Yeah, my internet keeps breaking up. I think it's the weather.
We are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'd like to call this meeting to order. And with that, just even before we begin tonight, a reminder about public comments. If you do make a public comment at some point, please give your name, your location from the school district, you know, what town or community you're from, and you're allotted 3 minutes. That's what we allot to every speaker. With that, if Mrs. Widener, if you could call the roll, please.
See ya.
Mr. Dorr?
Here.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Dr. Hallis?
Here.
Dr. Culler?
Here.
Mrs. Lofton?
Here.
Mrs. Mayers?
Here.
Mrs. Roberts? Mrs. Roberts? Mrs. Roberts?
I'm here.
And Mrs. White?
Here.
All present.
I think did you call Dr. Weston?
I'm here too.
Yes.
Oh. With that, if you'd stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, to our usual reading of the PV mission statement. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. And with that, I'd make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Matthew Dorr.
Second, Wade.
Okay, all those in favor, aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Do I have any nays? Okay. Motion passes. Approval of the minutes. There's a motion to approve the minutes of the November 9th, 2020 and December 7th, 2020 reorganization meeting and work session. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved, Wade.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Jean, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Item 1.07, December 7th, we had a special presentation of the 2021-2022 high school program planning guide. Okay, and then item 1.08, the board accepts comments on any topic at this time. And again, a reminder, anybody offering comment, if you would please state your name, where you're from, and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Gale.
Yes, hi, my name is Jared Gale. I'm from Lower Frederick Township. I'm calling, gave my comments here. This is directly to Dr. Hallis. I received word the other day you had a rather lengthy message for me. While I'm happy to hear you reached out, I'm sad to see you didn't have the nerve to actually contact me, directly. I'm sure you're taught with better manners than that and should address someone directly, not behind their back. But that's okay. I will take time out of my busy schedule to address your message. Jean, and I feel I can call you Jean at this point, seeing how much you seem to think about me. It's only fair. I am a bit perplexed at the nature of your message. As school board president, I would have hoped you spend more time finding ways to bring our children back into the classroom where they belong and are safe, as we know. Perhaps that isn't your agenda, and perhaps you're rather capitulating to the teachers union. I mean, we do understand your conflict of interest being married to a teacher, but your message was so widely obtuse and out of touch, even I'm surprised. In fact, I would bet I spend a larger portion of my day working on ways to protect our children and foster a safe, thriving, and learning environment than you do. What I can tell you is I don't spend any time worrying about what the union wants like you seem to. To make it clear, I love our awesome teachers, and I just want to be clear that I support all of them, not the agenda of the union. There's a difference between the two. We have some amazing teachers, and I'm proud to live in this district as such. Now, to get down to it, I have to admit, I have not heard of anybody being as arrogant and out of touch as you seem to be. Let's address this properly, Gene. And before we start,
Mr. Gale, do you have anything that's actually related
I'm going
to
to
the
continue speaking
agenda?
regarding my
Do
public
you
comment.
have anything that's
You want
actually
me to issue a
related to
public
the agenda?
comment. You want me to issue a public apology.
But
Wouldn't you
all
like this
public
issue?
comments have to actually be
Would love
related
to
to
come
the
to address
agenda.
the school board in person, but you cower in fear of your constituents by forcing virtual only meetings. Nice cover you have with the virus. Only problem is we know it can be done safely and effectively, as we did this summer in front of the high school when you held a meeting in person. Speaking of which, let's talk about that night. I wonder, do you often make it a habit to direct the state police to arrest people when they're waiting peacefully and patiently? Is it common for you to claim the high school, which my tax dollars help paid for, is private property and demand they are arrested for trespassing when all they're trying to do is give a speak in a public forum? As a Navy veteran at that, I have to give it to you, Gene. I'm glad I put my life on the line in service to protect cowards like you while you dodge real service to your country. I lost 42 of my guys in the desert. How about you? I must admit, you helped pull off a good one that night. Let's switch to the other part of your message. Fellow board member Beth Roberts, your pomposity and arrogance flowed like the Trevi fountain during this part.
Mr. Gale,
You
you're
find it
almost at
interesting
3
you call
minutes,
me
just so you're aware.
petty, vindictive, and then I'm made a political disagreements personal. I'm not the one using my power and authority as board president as kid to go demand a public apology. I can give you a link to Ironic if you need. It might be of help here. Go to Whisper Down the Lane. But I did post criminal filings of Beth Roberts in Pennsylvania. And I said, if this is the same Beth Roberts, there's an issue here. If not, she has nothing to worry about, and neither do you. So I find it kind of telling you feel the need as a man to stand up for her and show your misogynistic ways the way you did. How very unwoke of you. So here's what I am sorry for. I'm sorry you felt the need to arrest a member of the public when you felt the need to censor them multiple times and silence them purely because you didn't like being called out. I'm sorry you spent so much time thinking.
That's the end of the
Hardly I
3
think
minute
of you at
time
all.
period.
Okay, that's the end of 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Normally, we don't make a point of commenting on public comments, but I think this one might actually warrant it. Just so the public is aware, what Mr. Gale is accusing me of is he charged one of our fellow board members having committed a felony crime. That particular board member pursued a profession that required professional licensure. So rather than embarrassing Mr. Gale and calling him out publicly, I contacted the site administrator and asked the site administrator to please do some fact checking, knowing that, in fact, that board member, if they had in fact committed those crimes, would have had their professional license pulled. So apparently that makes me terribly arrogant. Okay, so be it. Please, if you're going to make a comment, please have them be related to the agenda. Mr. Gale had his opportunity. The public can judge as they please. Do we have any other comments, Mr. Ganesh? Any other hands?
No, Dr. Hallis.
Okay. So with that, let's turn to section 2 of our report, the student liaison report. Ms. McGovern and Mr. Smith, do you have anything for us?
As I'm sure the board is aware, I just wanted to say that we did resume in-person learning today, but that's about it. So thank you.
Mr. Smith, do you have anything? Okay. The president's report, there's really not so much a report as, again, a comment, folks. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's that simple. No one is going to, school's not going to be perfect. It is what it is, and we have to try to do our best as a community. And I'd assert that, comments like the ones that began this evening's meeting do not help the matter. We are more than happy as a board to receive comments and engage people in a democratic process. I really don't have much more to add to that. I think it's pretty straightforward. And with that, item 2.03, the superintendent's report. Dr. Russell, do you have anything for us?
Yes, if I could, Dr. Hallis, I just wanted to bring up a few follow-up points, if I may, from last week. And I want to inform the board as well as the public of Governor Wolf's order that came out on Thursday, and just talk a little bit more about our schedule for in-person learning as we work our way towards the holiday break and think about what happens afterwards. So on Thursday, there were protective mitigation measures as part of an updated order from Governor Wolf. And by now you may have seen these bullet points out of the order. What most directly affects Perkiomen Valley is the delay of PIAA sports or indoor and outdoor sports until at least January 4th. So as a board, I will ask us to think about this as we consider when our students may return on site after the holiday break. So I just wanted to call out some of those highlights and those points that have been made in Governor Wolf's order. And there's a link here if you're interested in reading more. In addition to being made aware of the postponing of sports until at least January 4th, we are not renting our buildings right now to the youth organizations or holding community ed classes, again, in our efforts to support the mitigation or spread of the virus. Another important aspect of Governor Wolf's updates recently has been around travel. And we know that oftentimes the holidays brings with it opportunities for travel. And we have learned that if individuals leave the state, and there are some exemptions, and we've added some updates to our health and safety plan. And when we get to that, we'll talk in a little bit more detail. There are some exemptions, but if individuals leave the state, they need to provide evidence 72 hours prior to re-entering the state that they have a negative COVID test, or they place themselves in travel quarantine for 10 days upon entering the state again without testing, or they place themselves in a 7-day quarantine with a negative test result on day 5 after they started that quarantine. So it's a bit complicated, and we've attempted to write out in an appendix that we'd like to add to our health and safety plan this evening. These updates just came out pretty recently. We wanted to make everyone aware of them, and so that they also go into the record. So individuals traveling out of the state, and really for leisure, if you have work out of the state, if you're out of the state for 24 hours or less, you're exempt. If you have a custody order and you're working with an ex-spouse around your children. So there are some exemptions, medical, if you're getting medical treatment, out of the state. However, for those of us that may wish to travel or have plans to travel out of the state, we do need to think about what's expected as we re-enter Pennsylvania. So lots of questions about coming back to in-person learning. And again, we had some district data that raised some questions for us these past couple of weeks, particularly in response to the holiday. And it wasn't just those positive cases that I was really hoping we would see decrease. It's also around the contacts that are reported to our nurses and the quarantines. The individuals we know are in quarantine because they were close contacts. And these events happened outside of school since we have been virtual or remote for the past 3 weeks. However, by the end of last week, in conversations with Mrs. Lewis, our data broadly, considering all 3 aspects of our district data, was trending downward, and that's really important. We continue to look at any evidence of linked transmission in our schools based upon the way that we conduct contact tracing. And again, you've heard me say quite a few times, that's led by Mrs. Meg Lewis, and she is in regular contact with the Office of Public Health. We continue to realize the burden of virus around us is heavy. However, there has been advice from medical experts indicating that if you are able to maintain that masking on the part of all individuals in school communities, social distance, cleaning protocols, and contact tracing, then school is something that can be supported with those aspects in place. So we resumed on-site instruction today, on-site learning, and we had our students in and out. We'll see what happens over the course of the rest of the week as there's some impending weather that's scheduled to maybe arrive Wednesday into Thursday. So stay tuned there. And I mentioned, and there was an email that went out to families today, if there is an inclement weather day called because of snow, it will be a traditional snow day this week. We do have some ideas about how we might redesign snow days. However, we're not ready for that, so that will not occur this week. And again, we continue to get updated information and stay as informed as possible. So the data that we look at really includes a variety of data. I had focused on district data last week, and I wanted to follow that up with a little bit more information and how the trending went downward by the end of the week. We also now follow the directions as a result of signing or committing to the attestation form. So we know that we're insubstantial as a county, and based on the size of our school, the enrollment of students, and that's if we were operating school normally, what would your enrollment be? The level of county transmission, which is substantial, and then based on the number of cases we may realize in our schools, we need to respond a certain way. And again, I went over this last week. I wanted to emphasize this is strong guidance from the state, and these are requirements that we will be obligated to uphold, having signed that attestation form and committing to that. So again, more direction, more guidance. This just gives you a larger picture. Some of the responses that we would be required to follow through on in the event, this is for medium schools as an example, realized 4 to 6 students or staff in the same school building over a 14-day rolling day period. So just wanted to review that. And I'd like to put out to the board for consideration in talking with Mrs. Lewis and Mr. Moran, as well as some others at the county level. I would like to recommend that our students remain virtual that first week after the holiday break, so that week of January 4th, where right now, according to the calendar, expected to resume school, and it would be expected to occur on site. I am suggesting that we postpone that 1 week, just again, to give any data spikes an opportunity to calm down. I'm interested in the board's thoughts. And if we're going to postpone students being on site until January 11th, it may make sense for us to consider what happens with our sports. Do we again postpone them 1 week in anticipation of some higher data than what we're typically used to? So that's something that I'll open up to the board, but right now, a recommendation that I'm leaning towards. Happy to entertain any of your comments, if you have any. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hallis.
I was just going to sort of back you up, Dr. Russell. I think that pause period might be a smart thing just to see what happens with the numbers. We obviously want school to open, and we've come up with a plan to do so. And I think we've come up with a good one that lets us sort of apply the proverbial brakes if we need to. And you know, unless there's other opinions on the board, I think that might be the smart thing to do is January 11th.
Okay, if as we get to the health and safety plan, there are some additional questions about that, please feel free to raise those. I know that Mrs. Lewis has joined us, and she's always a great resource and reference. But I think there are some other schools in the county, as I mentioned, doing this, so we can talk more about it if necessary. Otherwise, this is the way I'm leaning and would like to communicate with the community sooner rather than later. Okay, and lastly, you know, I've gotten some really nice parent feedback about our teachers and all that they're doing right now, and we are working to accommodate some of our families that were more comfortable remaining remote through the holidays. So I just wanted to share some of that feedback that I've received and give a shout out to our teachers. They really are doing backflips to accommodate our students and provide them with the strongest educational experience that they are able under these circumstances. And, you know, with things changing the way they do, we educators, we like to have our ducks in a row. And so sometimes that can be really challenging, but our teachers and our administrative team have done a nice job in managing and keeping us moving forward. So just a thanks to everybody for that. And with that, that concludes my report. Dr. Hallis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Russell. Item 2.04 is the Solicitor's Report. Mr. Subers, do you have anything for us?
Yes, the only comment I'd like to make this evening relates back to the earlier public comment. I'd just like to confirm to the board and to the public that I had done a search of the Unified Judicial Reporting System and confirmed that there were no criminal charges, criminal prosecutions, or criminal convictions against the board member that the allegations were raised against. That's my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subers. Item 2.05, sorry. Board and district committee reports. Does anybody have anything they'd like to report? I know things have probably been pretty quiet, but okay. With that, section 3, item 3.01, comments on any agenda item are taken at this time. Again, just a reminder, if you make a comment on an agenda item and comments need to be related to an agenda item, please give your name, your location in the district, in terms of a town, and you have 3 minutes.
I don't see any hands raised, Dr. Hallis.
Okay, and I think we had one comment submitted. Is that correct, Mrs. Widener? I think we only had one comment.
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
that's posted in 108.
Okay. So that's already that's posted and available for the public to review if they want. Okay. So item 3.02 is an approval of the consent agenda. The motion is to approve the consent agenda developed on December 7th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Matthew Dorr.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I have any nays? Okay, very good. Dr. Kolar, if you'd kindly do section number 4, education.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. Item 4.01, comments are accepted from the audience on education. I do not see any hands raised. Mr. Ganesh, do you see anything?
No, Dr. Kohler.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 4.02, which was the education update provided last week, December 7th. Item 4.03, there will be motion to approve the phased school reopening health and safety plan version 14 for the 2020-2021 school year as presented. Dr. Russell, before we make the motion, did you want to highlight some of the changes?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kolar. And really, the only change that we made since the version 13 that's been posted and you had access to is around the travel restrictions and the quarantine procedures. So we really tried to outline in greater detail beyond what I just shared in my report, some of the details and even some examples that could apply to our students and our staff should they opt to travel out of Pennsylvania and what they're expected to do upon return. So if there are any questions, happy to address those. However, I gave you the summary in my report. We've included the information in a little bit more detail in Appendix C. Otherwise, there have not been other changes outside of what was referenced in travel.
Okay, so I will go ahead and make the motion to approve the phased school reopening health and safety plan version 14.
Second.
So we have a second. Any comments
Second,
or
Wade.
questions from the board?
Oh, okay. Anybody have any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Dr. Kolar, you're doing this, aren't you? My apologies.
Oh, I don't know. We could do it either
Yeah.
way. I
So,
made the motion.
yeah,
I believe Mr.
good.
Austin made a second.
Yes.
So any comments or questions? I don't think there were any. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 4.04. There will be a motion to approve the revised PV Athletics Health and Safety Plan version 8 as presented. Again, Dr. Russell, did you want to highlight any changes?
There are no changes that have been incorporated into this document since last week. So thank you.
Oh, okay. So then I move to approve the health and safety plan for athletics.
Second. Matthew
Second.
Dorr.
Any comments or questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4.05 is a motion to approve the 2021-2022 high school program planning guide changed as presented. I so move.
Second, Wade.
Are there any comments or questions? I don't see any. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 4.06 is the enrollment report for December. If we could pull that up on the screen. Mrs. Smith or Dr. Russell, did you have any comments on the report?
Dr. Kolar, there isn't anything significant to report. These numbers do not reflect the requests that the elementary principals have received over the last week for students to have that temporary accommodation that we discussed for our elementary students who want to remain virtual for a week or two there. This is still based upon their selected mode of instruction.
Do you have numbers on the number of elementary students that have requested the audio?
I can look that up now. I do not know off the top of my head because it continues to change, but I can look it up. Absolutely. It has been increasing. And we got, thanks to Dr. Parr and Mrs. Lanehart and certainly Mr. Ganesh's team, we got lots of wireless headsets out to any teacher in this position. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16, 17. We are, skip back, we are about 35 students. Schwenksville, similarly close to 35. Evergreen, it looks like right now from the numbers that I see there, it may be 15. And South, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. South is in the low 20s. I will get the exact numbers and I can certainly make sure that Dr. Russell has that to include in this week's memo.
So I
Thank
just
you.
have a quick question, Laurie, then. If these numbers are what they are, can you reiterate and explain what an advantage would be for these particular families? Is there a duration that they're going to be listening in? Is this just to be utilized if they have to be absent or quarantine? Like, I need you to elaborate a little bit further, because although I understand the idea of listening in as a stopgap for the hybrid families that need to be absent for sickness or quarantine or contact tracing, I don't think that this is an acceptable mode of learning for families that are hybrid but now want to be virtual, and for a long-term situation, as in, the next semester or the rest of the year, for example. And the numbers to me indicate then that perhaps we need to reevaluate and add additional sections of full-time virtual classrooms. And I understand that that would involve teacher switches and whatnot, but to me, it's unacceptable for 35 students, for example, at Skipback to just indefinitely be listening in to their class. That's not a productive way for anyone to learn.
So I can certainly elaborate, Mrs. White. And I'm happy to follow up with the principals as well. But to my knowledge, the conversations with these families has been that they are looking for a very temporary solution. Many of them have asked for this simply through next week before we would go on break. And then the next group possibly have asked for this maybe into that first week after we would return. Now, if we go fully virtual, that may eliminate some of these requests, or maybe they'll continue into mid-January, but nobody has wanted this option to be their end result. They are all indicating that they want to come back into their blended model, but that they are looking for a very temporary opportunity, either due to a quarantine or just concerns about the numbers or whatever their family situation may be. So nobody seems to be looking at this for a long-term solution. They are very interested in having their children back on site when the numbers are, more acceptable to them. And although our teachers certainly are focusing on that audio and being able to listen in, I can tell you from Dr. Parr and Mrs. Lanehart that many of the teachers, even though they just started today, are already, they're turning on their camera. They're showing the kids so that they can, see the video as well. They're sharing their screens. So We set the audio as the minimum expectation, but I expect many of them will go, above that. But they are getting ready with the audio and the headsets are out there.
And so I appreciate that, that expansion of explanation. I guess my kind of devil's advocate question would be, do they feel like it's only a temporary solution because they feel like this is the only solution that they have? Do you know what I'm saying? So when we talked last week about comfort levels and the readjustment of expectations, because this could only possibly be a temporary solution, obviously that's how they're looking at it. So in other words, if they were to have, I'm curious to know if they were to have a virtual solution, in a true sense, if what that interest would be. If you're telling me the numbers are 35 and 50% of the schools. So I guess that would be my counterpoint, is that I feel like the response would be that it's a temporary solution because it is not sustainable.
And I need to talk to the elementary principals more. They have not expressed to me a need to create another virtual section, that the parents are not requesting to become fully virtual, but I can absolutely follow up with them and we can include some things in the memo if that would be helpful.
And Mrs. Smith, also last month I had asked about these highlighted classrooms on the virtual voyage that say they have a paraprofessional assigned to them. And last month you had said that not all 5 of these classes have a full-time paraprofessional, and that needed to be adjusted, but it's still on there this month. So do they have a full-time paraprofessional assigned to them?
So I'm going to defer that one either to Dr. Rustle or Mr. Moran. I'm not sure the staffing in each of those classrooms.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett, we do need to correct this. I mean, there is a para here, and there is a para part-time in 3rd grade here. There is one in 2nd grade here. The other 2, I do not believe there is a para. So part-time in 3rd grade at Evergreen, full-time in 2nd grade at Evergreen, and then 1st grade at Skipback. So we need to adjust that, and we'll take care of that for next time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other comments on the elementary, do you want to pull up the secondary?
And you will notice that this one does reflect the changes that I shared in the education update last week, with that trending increase, particularly at the high school, was much more significant, and then the middle school and the elementary was pretty level. But these numbers are reflective of the changes, particularly high school, middle school here.
Reflective up until when? Are these accurate as of today, or?
Mrs. Widener, can you answer? Do you know when the building principals last updated?
I'm not sure. I think this is as of last week.
Can we add a date to the bottom of these spreadsheets for whenever
Sure.
they're?
And then can we also get those updated numbers as of this week in the memo?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The one comment I had, there's been some talk about the high school maybe consolidating to 2 groups instead of 3. So has there been any more discussion about that, or is that something that's on hold for now?
Dr. Russell, have you had any conversations with Dr. Moss? I know she continues to think about this. I'm not exactly sure where we are in that decision, though.
Dr. Moss is actually on the line as a panelist. I think she'll speak to it. Thank you.
So yes, thank you. So we're certainly considering moving to 2 groups rather than 3. This has been a very busy week with changes. So we are actually up to 529 students at the high school level who are now virtual, and that's not just the virtual for next week. There are some parents who want their students out of school until the beginning of January. This is the students who are expecting to be out for the entire rest of the marking period. So with that in mind, I have not had the chance yet to start crunching those numbers, but I am intending to look at the sections and see how we are looking section wise. I know this would, being on a 2-day rotation would or two-group rotation would be much better for our tech school students. And I would like to try to make some things easier for them. So I'm really looking into that. I'm hoping to look at it this week. Definitely by the end of the holiday break, I'll have a more definitive answer.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the enrollment report? Okay, it does not look like anyone has their hand raised. So that concludes that section. Dr. Russell, I did want to just ask before we conclude the education section, if maybe you could speak a little bit more about the comment you made regarding the snow days, because I know there's been some talk about that. And then we did all receive an email today about this week. So could you tell us a little more what you're thinking? Because I think there's a lot of families wondering.
We are thinking that there will be a point when we can actually take advantage of some of our newer ways of delivering the service of school and not have a snow day be a day of school we have to make up, or one of those days in the calendar that we have to consider. So one of the things that Mrs. Smith has led in some conversations with our teacher leadership team and other administrators is the idea that on snow days, we could organize an asynchronous learning day where students would be provided work to do, and the day would then count as a day of school. So it wouldn't be that traditional, you don't have to worry about any school stuff unless you choose to days. It would instead be, it would count as a day of school. Now we have 3 snow days built into our calendar currently. And because we don't feel quite ready to, with communication or explanation, we did not want to necessarily make one of the days this week an asynchronous day. And we were also reluctant to commit to a synchronous one in the event there are power outages. If we get as much snow as is expected, we're just not sure exactly what to expect. But moving forward, because you as a board approved some, that template, if you remember, to vary the way we deliver instruction, we have some greater flexibilities this year. So we're going to take advantage of those. And we'd like to talk a little bit more about that with our teachers as well as our community before we implement. So this week, in the event we have a snow day, we would like for it to be a traditional snow day. And there was a little bit of parent feedback about that too. Parents are sort of looking forward to that if it does indeed materialize. But moving forward, it should put us in a good position not to have to make up days at the end of the school year. The opportunity, the flexibility.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. And I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I know that there's been a lot of buzz for both sides. So I was just curious what the discussion had been.
Yeah, sure. And hopefully that helped.
Yes, it did.
Good. Thanks.
I don't have anything else for section 4. I don't see any hand raised, so that concludes my section.
Okay, thank you much, Dr. Kolar. Mr. Dorr, if you could take the next section, business.
Thank you, Dr. Callis. 5.01, comments on business. I don't see any hands up. All right, so moving on to 5.02, there was a finance update last week by Mr. Weaver. So we'll move on to section 5.03, grants and donations. We had one grant from Univest Bank for $35,000 for the EITC approval programming. Funds will be awarded to grant recipients. 5.04, 5, 6 are on consent. 5.07, the motion to ratify ComSys Inc. CSI to complete the cafetorium sound system upgrades at the 4 elementary schools at a total of $48,785 via CoStars, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from board members?
I just have one comment. What's actually more of a clarifying question. So this covers the elementary schools. Where do we stand on the competition, Jim, for the high school? Did I miss that somewhere?
Mrs. White, that was approved. It's the agenda item 5.06.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't. Oh, I see it right there. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Sorry, do we have ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Mr. Dorr?
Thank you. Section 5.8 and 9 are on consent. 5.10 is a new item. It's a motion to request to approve the facility rental fees for 2020 and 2021 as presented, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from board members? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Mr. Dorr, if you continue.
Thank you. 5.11 is a 5-year projection presentation. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Good evening, school board members. Tonight we have a 5-year projection that will take us through the 2025-2026 fiscal year. So we will start. And remember that our projections are developed through a number of different things. This year, I'm very happy and proud to present something that the board has approved and brought in as in the means of Forecast 5 software package. It is working well within our current guidelines. And we've added the current information and the typical information from the PD 2057s and the 2028s, which are our budget documentation and our own internal spreadsheets. Additionally, we've gathered outside independent information to help our school board, in particular our finance committee and our school board, understand why we've come up with some of the assumptions that we have. And we do have some backup. Those examples, the Act 1 and the PSERS, you'll see in a little bit. If we, just a caution on the assumptions, you know that Amy and I are very conservative in our approach. We make the assumptions with the most available information that we have. Trend and data analysis is key. However, under COVID, it's all a little bit different, and it has really shaken up some of our tried and true trend analysis. Hopefully, we will see a rediscovery of that trend that has been based on our experiences over the years within this 5-year projection, and hopefully you'll see that. Remember, economic stress and stress in general will clearly impact these assumptions tomorrow. Right after I give these tomorrow, they could change. So the revenue assumptions for revenue tax base assessment growth, just the base itself, the first year we have a 0.25% growth. Typically, we're at a 0.5 or a little bit higher, especially over the past 5 years. So we'll go with a 0.25 year one, and then a 0.5 for the rest of the 4 years. We do include a tax increase as part of this projection, and that tax increase is based upon the current Act 1 index of 3.0. And here you can see, if you can go back one slide. Thank you. So here is one of these identifiers associated with how we come up with some of these things. It's not just trend analysis in our gut. This is an independent verification from the Independent Fiscal Office of Pennsylvania, providing an Act 1 index projection based upon February 2020. This is pre-COVID. But remember, Act 1 itself, as set up by the legislature, has a 3-year weighted average. So it does help to offset spikes and peaks as well. So just wanted to keep that in mind as we move forward. We utilize 3.0% Act 1 index for many of our expenditures moving forward. And so it is also our key indicator for our tax increases. There is no way that the board is assuming that a 3% tax increase is the only way to go. I've just included it every year based upon the Act 1 index and the fact that it's there and helps us plan moving forward.
So apologies for that, Mr. Weaver, the jumping around. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Went a little nuts.
Okay.
Got it under control now.
Okay, great. So here is an actual cut from the Forecast 5, which helps us to indicate very quickly what a 3% tax increase shows on our projections moving forward. You can see here, this sets up the assessed valuation at the 0.25 the first year and then a 0.5% in the following 4 years. What the millage rate would be after 3% each year in the cumulative effect, the index as the 3% as it has been listed in I've told you so, and what the total tax increase would be on our real estate taxes. Simple bar charts that help to provide some background to our story. So if we move to the total revenue projections, again, with those assumptions in place, this is a cut and paste out of the Forecast 5 model, commonly known as the FiveCast model. We did purchase the entire suite of software. This is one of those items. And you can see here where we have revenue growth as structured between local and state. We did keep our state subsidies and federal subsidies identical because of the unknowns and the variables that we cannot predict as impacting our state and federal government and our budgets. We don't know what kind of grants are going to be coming forward in the future, if any. We don't know where the hits are going to be, so we'll keep it steady over 5 years. There are slight adjustments for state revenues for PSERS and FICA revenue streams based upon the expenditures that we have in a slide that you'll see in a little bit. So here's just another way to tell our story. Nothing exciting here. It's just a different way with different colors and a different graph direct from the FiveCast to help explain in a simplest form. Moving on to the expenditure assumptions, we've increased salaries by an overall 3.18% in 21-22, and then a flat 3% for each of the next 4 years of the projections, again, based upon the Act 1 index. Oftentimes, contract negotiations and agreements settle somewhere around Act 1. If it's less than that, that's great. That's typically our ceiling from a negotiation standpoint. It doesn't always have to be, but it's a good general guideline for us to follow. That cut that you see there is the PSERS rate. That was per a publication from 2019. And again, reaching into independent verification of what kind of employer contribution rates we're using for PSERS based upon the information that the state is providing. They have not updated us for 2020 yet. They just certified the rate for 21-22 instead of 34.95, as you see on that cut sheet there. It's actually at a 34.94, which is slightly lower, which is a good thing for us. And remember, that is built upon a 7.25% rate of return, which we all know might be a bit of a reach. However, in a projection based upon the independent verification, it's as good as a number for us to use as any. Moving on to the next slide. Other expenditure assumptions: health insurance increase at 7% per year. That's industry trend. Transportation at a 2% increase per year. Again, we're in contract negotiations with STA, trying to extend that contract. Cost of insurance, it's a flat $17,000 year one bump, and then it stays in there moving forward. And that is one of the things that we talked about in the Finance Committee real quick, that the insurance industry is trying to find its way around how COVID will impact it. So that might be one variable, for instance, that might be a little bit higher than what we're currently showing. Tuition has a big increase, again, associated for year one for COVID. And then hopefully our students rediscover Perkiomen Valley School District, COVID goes away, and they come back to within our buildings. Supplies, a straight increase at 1%. Again, most of our supplies associated with COVID have been driven by grant opportunities. We would be hopeful that those grant opportunities would continue into the following years. However, we all know that that payment stream eventually runs out. We'll have to show an increase. And debt service increase is directly taken from the payment schedules from Jamie Doyle and PFM presentations. So if you look at the expenditure projections, you can see there that we're predicting and projecting that we grow from a budget of 112 million this year, somewhere at year 5 at the end of this projection, 2026, about $128 million. Again, some graphs there that show the breakdown in simplest forms. And if you click to the next slide, you can see an identical type of graph for the revenues. They're in structured order. Again, that shows another way broken down by color loosely on major function. Again, to help tell our story. When you combine the revenues and expenditure projections, and now you meld into it what our current general fund balance is, which is the green line there, you can see that naturally with more expenditures that are more than the revenues over time, the simple projection look says, well, in order to make a balanced budget, you must take from the fund balance, which we all know from a school board perspective, that's not necessarily the case. We will have adjustments to that, and we have other options afforded to us, such as reductions in expenditures or other opportunities for increases in revenue streams that help basically drag down our fund balance somewhere to about $5 million at the end of 2026 if these projections are all 100% correct. It generally gives you the idea of the differences. One more clear cut here associated with the general fund balance. Obviously, again, this says it a little bit different. Each year's surplus or deficit, obviously it's a deficit as we presented it. That's the chart on the right, and the impact on the general fund balance over the term of the 5 years on the left. Again, it's a planning document. It helps us to set us up. It's much more accurate than previous ones, especially since we have been working with Forecast 5, number 1, and number 2, we're actually recognizing some sort of real estate tax increase. So it's a positive. Any questions on that? We do know it's an uphill climb every presentation for a 5-year projection. Okay, thank you. That projection will roll into, Mr. Dorr, if I may, our first equal sign.
You may.
Thank you. Our first equal sign presentation. So this piggybacks off of the revenue presentations from November, and we do have some adjustments, and we have some positive adjustments associated with earned income tax, real estate transfer tax, and interim real estate taxes. Those 3 taxes are driven by what we would consider would be a healthy economy. Remember that when we prepared this year's budget for 2021, we recognized a huge impact based upon COVID and a reduction in earned incomes based upon people losing their jobs. Real estate transfer taxes were cut in half based upon the fact that we thought people would not purchase houses here or have the flexibility to move, and interim real estate taxes because we kind of figured, okay, that's another, if people have extra money, they can move forward with additional additions to their houses or build additional buildings onto their properties. That would slow down. That was the thought process. The reality is that we have seen that these alternative revenue sources continue to be strong. And we know that because if you look at our treasurer's report that we'll look at in a couple of motions here, you can see that we are equal to, or just about equal to, where we were last year pre-COVID pandemic. So we are recognizing the fact that we have strong earned income taxes, and we're building some of that back in, recouping some of that for the 2021 2022 general fund balance for EIT, real estate transfer tax, and interim taxes. Hence, that's why the growth is there. And we still do have, and we continue to monitor those items specifically for that growth moving forward, just to make sure. And we have one final adjustment on the revenue side, which is to adjust for FICA and PSERS. Remember, we went out with revenue numbers. Now that we know the expenditures, we'll be able to make an adjustment. In this particular case, it's a negative adjustment on the revenues. Total adjustments for tonight's presentation on the revenue side, $711,030. Here is a quick snapshot summary. It's loaded with everything in there. You can see that now with those additional revenue streams, we are actually showing a 0.83% growth budget year to budget year for the revenues as listed. And there are some notes in there that show that. If you move on to the local, there's that cut again, that again shows, for instance, the earned income tax. We've recognized budget year to budget year, a growth in earned income tax of $812,000 since we began in November. And again, we still have, you can tell, we still have some room to grow if the economy stays as we think it might for earned income taxes, I should say. Real estate transfer taxes and interims, we will continue to monitor as well. Here are some snippets in there that we were talking about in November. I decided to keep them in there about the real estate taxes, about the strong collection rate associated with them. And the next slide is also a cut sheet of the earned income taxes, where you can see we've been monitoring this every day for about 7 years. And so we have significant trend in data that helps to support where we're coming out with that increase in the earned income tax and our positivity moving forward. Hopefully it can continue to grow, and we'll show more of it as we move on. Real estate transfer cut tax, again, period to period comparison, which shows the growth. Here is the state and federal listed. Again, Almost no movement. The only movement that we show is a reduction for the rental reimbursement debt service, because there's less debt service that's subject to rental reimbursement. That's coming off. And the Social Security and retirement, again, driven by the changes in the recognition and salaries from where we were in November. Again, there's a little snippet that backs up the reduction for the rental reimbursement. Other things to think about: interest earnings. Well, interest earnings, that's not our savior. We know that. And if it's anything like the recession recovery from 2007, it may take years for the interest earnings to recover. We're hopeful that it's not, and that 2 to 3 years in, interest earnings recover. Right about now, we're at a 0.01 or 0.005% in some of our limited investments that we can invest in. So we're curious as to where that may go, but don't lock in on that particular number. It's really low at this point in time, and we don't expect it to change. Some of the other things, rental income. Well, we do know now that we have the, it's going to slow, and then it's going to start slow, and we're going to build upon it now that we have the rental and activity fees set. We can move forward with those. Hopefully we'll see a spike in those over the next 6 to 8 months that we can recognize then in 21, 22. Hopefully the athletic ticket sales and parking fees and all of those things that we had good debate about and we've now withheld on or reduced, we might want to revisit. Maybe we don't want to, I don't know. And so again, we have a conservative approach, but yet we still feel that we have some growth that we've already recognized. We're conservative, so we'll once we're convinced, we make sure that we'll show it in our budgeted revenues moving forward. Any questions on revenues? Okay, moving on to the expenditures for tonight, the equal sign. So the first way that we always start is the enrollment projections based upon the 9-year cohort survival method. And essentially what this is doing is this is taking the live birth data and then taking algorithms that are created by the previous 10 years and then forwarding them 10 forward years into the future. And this is a mess. It did not respond very well, specific to the students that are leaving, specific to COVID. So I've included it here, but I'm here to tell you we're not using it. It's just past practice and I'm leaving it in there. We'll have to continue to monitor this over the entire course of the budget. I do know Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Widener are working on the actual enrollments. That's pretty much more important moving forward. But the reason I included this is this was one of our variables associated with how we generated our building budgets, because our building budgets are generated by cost per student, depending on the level, and then where we expected their enrollment to be. I am here to tell you, and I do know that the Finance Committee was aware of this, but to the full board, we have frozen all of the allocations for 21-22 based upon the same allocations for 2021. We feel that's fair, we feel that's equitable, and we feel that's the right thing to do moving into 21-22. So just wanted to make that statement and get that out there. Our principals are very appreciative of that because that's one less thing that they really have to worry about in addition to all of the expectations for studies and education. So just cut right to the chase here. These are major object codes by description over there by the Pennsylvania School Code. You can see where we're basically budget year to budget year going up about $4.2 million in this first look. It's about a 3.73% increase. And you can see individually where those increases occur. Now, what we do, as we have done in the past, we go into each line item, we highlight them, and we have a couple of blurbs associated with each one of those object codes. So Dr. Russell, if you could. Some high-level topics. And overall, salaries are based upon contracts, agreements, or Act 1 index. We've already talked about that from a revenue perspective in the Forecast 5 perspective. This presentation does include 6 new positions. We've added salary plus benefits associated with these 6 new positions. 2.0 special education teachers, 1 at East, 1 at West. 2 mental health teachers for 6th grade, 1 at East, 1 at West. 1 BCBA for autistic support, and 1.0 for an inclusion facilitators. These were the 6 main components as administration spoke that we really do need to address moving forward. And these were our highest needs. So we took those 6 and we actually put them right into the budget. for tonight's presentation. In the past, we've kind of held them out and we played with true up costs and that kind of stuff. I felt it was very important that we include these, and that next bullet point, we actually removed the true up costs as well because of the resolution. And I feel that the board needed to have all the information ahead of them so that when we talk about the resolution in January, everybody's on board with where we're going. So that bullet point, we did remove the true up costs. We are based upon the presentation that was provided in October by Mr. Alabach. We recognized additional increases for charter schools and special education needs to the tune of $700,000. We increased health insurance costs by 7%. That's a $788,000 increase. And remember, these are early. So the hope is that with Mr. Moran at Bucksbont, as Mr. Alabach did, he will continue to bring good information, either in our experience or that the actual trend data changes and the rates actually go down over looks 2 and 3 over the next couple of months. So that's a really high number to start with. Hopefully that one will come down. PSERS increase based upon a straight increase, 34.51 to 34.94. That is a $744,000 increase. Bus contract increase, we just threw that number out there based upon a 2% increase. Legal fees increase almost $80,000. That's based upon actual where we're at right now, budget to actual. Special education tuition costs of about $60,000, and a debt service increase as it currently stands of $51,838. Those are the high level topics all throughout our entire chart of accounts. So if you move into each and every individual major object code now, salaries, we've presented it the same way the past couple of years. It seems to have worked out fairly well. You can see the 6 new positions are listed. The true up costs are taken out. We have PVESPA contract negotiations. Those are starting, and other adjustments in the salary accounts based upon performance or audited needs. Benefits, this has a lot to it. Obviously, the FICA was based upon the steady 7.65% and driven by the object code salaries. Plus, we have actually gone back to looking at what an actual rate of application would be associated with this, because not 100% of our salaries over the past couple of years have actually been subject to FICA or to PSERS. So we've actually calculated a calculation rate that is applicable. So it's somewhere about 98% or 94%, depending upon which one respectively. You can see that the salaries will drive PSERS and FICA. I talked about the Bucksbont, and other slight adjustments were made based upon performance and audited results. Moving into the 300s, again, simple cut there. We do have an increase for legal fees of almost $80,000. However, we do have other adjustments within the 300s that help actually to reduce that number a slight bit by $2,575. So an increase in one major object code 300, it was offset by a reduction in some other object codes. 400s, right off the top, we have an increase for the expected tech lease associated with Mr. Ganesh and the technology needs moving forward. We do have operations increases for sewer, water, and disposal bills. The disposal is based upon a 3-year contract that we entered into through the MCIU, and the sewer and water is just based upon performance of what our performance needs. We did have some other additional increases as listed associated with the fact that we had 3 major projects within the actual numbers. You can see there the 2019-2020 actual number, 2.6 million, almost $2.7 million. And I wanted to highlight that because if you're looking at that, you're saying, okay, actuals were lower, budget number was lower compared to where we actually ended up. That's because we are using capital projects, committed for capital projects in the general fund. And therefore, when we have those projects come out, the dollars associated with that come out of the fund balance, the committed for capital projects, but the actual expenditure does get posted to an object 450 for new construction for those items. So, and I do list those 3 major items associated with that increase, just in case you were curious. Object 500s, again, we talked about that with the increases there, and that's really the heavy hitter associated with object to object increases budget year to budget year. Some slight supply increases associated in 600s associated with general supplies and natural gas and fuel oil as listed. And then equipment, a minor adjustment associated with expenditure audit, and then the 900 object code, mainly driven by the debt services on the next slide. So when you look at revenues to expenditures, here's a cut sheet of the interactive. You can see here where we have 111, 192, 170 on our revenues as of tonight. And the first look equal sign expenditures, 116,862,15. That means our shortfall tonight as presented is 5.6, almost 5.6, almost $5.7 million. When you look at that and compare that, that is a straight calculation of a 7.641% increase. And on the right-hand side, you can see a quick sheet that shows what our 3% Act 1 index increase drives of 2.225 million. And the next item on that column is 3,443,000. That means that we have to utilize existing fund balance, show additional revenues, or have or streamline our expenditures and have expenditure cuts, which we know we always aim to please with those three different variables associated with that. However, moving forward, we do have some fund balances available to us that we should talk about and get on the record so we can make these adjustments in January. The PSERS committed has been a standard philosophy of this board as set up. We are recommending right now from an administrative perspective that we do utilize $373,000 in our PSERS commitment as planned by design. And we would recommend that. That's on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, our debt service, we had been following through with a similar philosophy as we were with the PSERS committed. However, we remember we had a very successful refunding. And what we had to do in order to recognize those savings for the refunding was actually let 1920 fiscal year end. Once the 1920 fiscal year ended, we then could actually see and feel those refunding monies. And now that's why our debt service fund balance actually has grown from to the tune of 739,000 to 1.78 million. So that gives us options to utilize that debt service fund balance in a similar manner like we have in the past. So our recommendation is to take that $1.782 million. Again, we will have discussion and approval in January. And take discussion tonight if you so desire, and take that 1.782 million and divide it over 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. The recommendation is to utilize it within 3 years. Again, trying to match up where we feel the hole might happen because of COVID and other economic influences might impact that and hamper our ability to make the shortfall go away and end up with a tax increase within the 3%. The recommendation is to utilize the 594,000 over 3 years in the debt service fund. If you take those two into consideration, you can see what those two uses of fund balances do to the shortfall. That takes it from the 7% down to a 6.33%. And furthermore, if you look at what that means for what is driven by our actual Act 1 index of 2.225, get us within the 3%, we then have to utilize additional unassigned fund balance or COVID reserve to reduce that shortfall of about 2.476 million to get us to the 3%, or again, show additional revenues that would reduce that number, or reduce expenditures as presented tonight. And we all know we start out high and we tend to thin those out over time. So speaking to the unassigned fund balance, we're at the 8% max based upon this year's budget number. We are at 9,013,162. So we have monies available there to help utilize to offset that shortfall for 21-22. And the COVID reserve associated with what you've approved tonight with the movement to the food service fund to help resupply the food service fund, that, in addition to the amount that we utilize for to have a balanced budget for 2021, means that our COVID reserve sits at about almost $2.9 million as well. So both of those avenues and available fund balances we could further use to help meet our first goal, which is to get within the Act 1 index, sign the resolution. That's why it's so important for us to prove this tonight and to get the school board on board with our recommendations, and to give comfort zone for in January when we have to talk about the resolution to stay within the Act 1 index. And I would recommend that we do that because we have plenty of variables to help offset and bring us within that 3%. And then we work that 3% down as we see fit over the next couple of years or next couple of months, sorry. So again, the recommendation, it will be in January based upon what we have in front of us, is to recommend that the board pass the Act 1 resolution in January. That means we go back to somewhat of a normal timeline for our budgetary means, which means we don't need preliminary budget approval until May, and then final budget approval in June. And there are all the factors that I had talked about as far as why we would recommend that at this time. Here's just a little snapshot. I'm keeping this calendar going because the recommendation is to pass the Act 1 resolution, and that's kind of where we're at tonight. Any questions on the first look equal sign? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And this ends my section.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorr. Section number 6, payment of bills. Dr. Weston, if you could do that, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hallis. Item 6.01, comments on the payment of bills. Are there any comments on the payment of bills? I'm looking in the participants list and I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I will assume no questions. And we'll move on to item 6.0. The ratify bills and payroll and authorization of payments. The recommended action on this item is a motion to ratify the payment of bills and payroll as per the list submitted for the period ending November 30th, 2020, and to authorize the payment of bills on the check and voucher registers submitted for December. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion from board members? Okay, seeing none. Sorry, my brain just skipped a beat. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, motion passes.
Very good. Next item, item 6.03, the approval of the treasurer's report and financial statements. Recommended action on this item is a motion to approve the treasurer's report and financial statements, including the summary of cash and investment accounts as prepared by the administration for the period ending November 30th, 2020, and I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes.
Very good, and that concludes section 6.
Thank you very much. Section 7, professional personnel, if you could kindly do that, Mrs. Evans-Brockett.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hallis. Section 701, comments from the audience are accepted on professional personnel, and I see one hand raised.
Mr. Kendall?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dave Kendall. I'm a resident of Schwegsville, and I have a couple of questions for the board and Dr. Russell. I'll just run through them one at a time. My first question is, does the district audit the private social media accounts of employees to determine whether employees are in compliance with district policies?
Mr. Kendall, this is a comment period. This is not a question and answer period. So you can make any comments you want. And later, when the board has their comment section, they may choose to answer them. But at this time, you have 3 minutes to make any comments.
All right, I'll try again later. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands raised. 702, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all on consent. 707 is a new item. The recommended action is to ratify or approve the leaves of absence as listed, and I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Motion passes.
Item 708, the recommended action is to ratify or approve the provisional employment of the long-term substitute and extended daily substitute personnel as listed pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from board members?
I just, not in relation to voting on this, but how are we on filling positions? I saw we had a couple in the leaves of absence, some FFCRAs, and I don't see that all of them have been filled here. Do we have unfilled positions at this point?
Mr. Moran, are you comfortable speaking to that?
I am. We currently have filled positions as far as the leaves that are represented here. We may not have the actual fulfillment on this board agenda, so you may see that in January when we have all the paperwork. We do have one unfilled position currently. It was a short-term leave between last week and up to break, and then we are looking to fill that position when we come back in January. So we do have one unfilled position that is filled by a day-to-day substitute and or coverage at the high school level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Okay, motion passes.
And item 709, the recommended action is to ratify the appointments of the 2020-2021 winter coaches as listed, including salary plus additional associated payroll and benefits costs, pending completion of all necessary documentation, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from board members? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nays? Okay, motion passes. Section. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just said that concludes section 7. You're fine.
Thank you very much. Section 8, support personnel. Mrs. Lofton, could I ask you to please do this section, please?
Absolutely, Dr. Hallis. Section 8.01, comments on support personnel are accepted at this time. And I'm not seeing any hands up. So we will proceed. Items 8.02, 8.03, and 8.04 were approved on the consent agenda. Item 8.05. We have a motion to ratify / approve the provisional employment of the community education personnel as listed, pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements, and I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from board members?
Dr. Hallis, I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Motion passes.
Okay. Item 8.06 was also approved on consent, and that brings us to 8.07, acceptance of retirements and resignations. The motion is to accept the retirements and resignations as listed, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lofton. And section 9, governance, Mrs. Mayers, if you could kindly do that section. Mrs. Mayers, we're having, I can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Mrs. Mayers?
I can't.
No, she's having trouble again with the, with her audio. That's okay. All right. I can step in and do that real quick. So item 9.01, comments on governance. Comments from the audience are accepted on governance at this time. I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything in the chat. So with that, item 9.02, which is a, the following policies are presented for a first reading: 612, 613, 614, 706.1, 708, 811, 909, and 911. Any comments or questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, items 9.03 and 9.04 were on consent. Item 9.05 is a discussion for board appointments to committees for 2021. I had mentioned to everyone that if they did have an interest in switching any committees to let me know. I know that I will need someone to fill my spot on the Montgomery County Intermediate Units Legislative Committee, and I know Mrs. Evans-Brockett had asked or stepped up to said she was willing to do that. If there's anybody else with an interest, let me know. But beyond that, that's all I have on that particular matter, unless anybody else has a comment. I'll be reviewing the committee assignments as soon as I can and getting back in touch with everybody. Okay, no questions or comments. Item 9.06, again, is a discussion of the review of 2021 or 2020 board goals. Any questions or comments from board members?
I mean, Dr. Hallis, I would just like some more time to review them. And
Sure.
It's something we can talk about in January.
Yes. Yes.
Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and I don't think that'll hold us up in any way. Am I correct in that, I believe? Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. So with that, that ends section 9 on governance. And section 10, closing items. Comments are accepted from the audience at this time. I'm not, we have one hand raised.
Mr. Kendall?
I'm just curious if now is the appropriate time to ask questions.
Again, it's never a question period during a board meeting. It's just a comment. Otherwise, the board meetings would not be able to flow appropriately. But if you, the next item is comments from board members. So board members may choose to answer any question that you have, but it's not a back and forth discussion.
Okay, where is an opportunity to ask the board questions?
Mr. Kendall, this is Brian Subersey, solicitor. Under the Sunshine Law, the only requirement is to make a reasonable opportunity for public comment. The Sunshine Law does not provide for a question and answer period with the board.
All right, well, I think the board has received my comments. I would like you to confirm that you received those. I sent them earlier today.
We did actually, at the beginning of the meeting, confirm that, and they are posted, or if they're not posted already, they will be posted for the public.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. I know comments in the chat. So with that, I'll move to section 10.02, comments from board members. Do board members have any comments? Okay.
All right,
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to teachers, staff, administration, board members. Everyone's working really hard, and I think the students really appreciate it. It's not a great time right now, but everybody's working really hard, and that means a lot to students. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms.
I'm sorry.
Ms. McGovern, back at you. I know that students are working so hard to make this work. And we're trying really hard to make the environment as easy for you as possible, because out of all of this, you're the most important ones. No matter what happens, no matter what else goes on, the students are the most important ones. So we're really, really trying hard to make sure that everybody is as comfortable as possible, and that you all are learning and comfortable and feeling free to reach out to any of the adults in the room if you're having any difficulties or any problems. So we're always here for you. That's why we're here. We're here for you.
Any other comments? Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jean. I don't want
That's okay.
drag this on longer than it needs to be, but I just wanted to say happy 5th night of Hanukkah to anyone that celebrates within our community. And I wish everyone a very peaceful holiday season. And I hope that everybody takes some time to enjoy their families over winter break, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And then I also just wanted to congratulate and really thank the high school, their drama program, with their production of Clue. They persevered, and they were able to put on a really top-notch, very professional and mature performance. So that's on PVHS YouTube. And I love that it's there, because you can watch it more than one time. But I just wanted to say congratulations, and to direct anybody in the community that happened to miss the live viewing of it, that they're able to watch it on YouTube. I'm just really proud that our kids and their mentors were able to put together something so positive during this time. So thank you for that, for bringing that to the community.
Thank you, Mrs. White, excuse me. Any other comments from board members? Okay, I just want to make the public aware that prior to the meeting, we met in executive session to discuss legal matters and contract negotiations. And with that, I just want to say, thank you to everybody. I mean, I know students and teachers and administrators are working very, very hard, but so are parents. You're part of this process too, and it's a difficult time, and I think we all have to figure out how to soldier on together. And with that, I wish everybody happy holidays, be that happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, whatever it might be, and everybody take care. Until we see you again in January. And there ends our meeting. Good evening.
Thanks, Jean. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.